Today we're talking about the Internet of Things. And I have some experts here you're going to be happy to hear from. So we have Kevin, Roberta, Perry, and Michael. We're just going to quickly go around and hear who they are and why they're here to talk to us today.
Good afternoon, I think now, this time. My name is Kevin ODonovan. I head up our sales into the utility sector for Intel Corporation worldwide. And we're here at European Utility Week. We just see the entire, what's now known as IoT, and we're here to kind of burst the hype and see where it's making it real. And it's all about, people are using technologies today to solve problems. People don't buy IoT, they buy line of business solutions. And that's where the hype becomes reality.
Okay, thanks. Roberta.
Roberta Bigliani from IDC Energy Insights. We are an analyst company, so we look at the trends in the market, and I'm 100% dedicated to utilities industry. So I'm looking at the digital transformation that is occurring in utilities, and of course IoT is part of it. And again, we are not interested in IoT per se and the hype around it. We are interested in making things happening and looking at how utilities can make things happening. So definitely is an area of focus, and really interested in having this discussion with
Great.
the others in the panel.
Thanks for being here. Perry.
Hi, Perry Stoneman with Capgemini. I lead our utility practice globally. We're here because historically we've been here looking at smart meter as call it Generation 1 IoT, but we're also looking at all the new technologies, new vendors, and having meetings with partners and analysts like Roberta to look at how this technology can transform the customer relationship. So it really is about the customer engagement in the end, not just about the technology for technology's sake.
Okay.
I'm Mike Allman. I'm the president of Bits2 Systems, leading provider of the industrial Internet of Things, software for the industrial Internet of Things. So we're here to help the utilities understand the benefits and where the industry is going. Okay,
great. So, Internet of Things. Let's start there. First of all, it's one of those bubbly terms we hear a lot about. We hear a lot about Internet of Things, data analytics. A couple of years ago, it was a customer engagement, and also oftentimes we have these terms, concepts boil up in this industry, which is moving so quickly, but we're not always on the same page about what it is we're really talking about. So before we start breaking down whether this is hype or real, let's kind of figure out what it is, and let's make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Why don't you go ahead and give that a shot?
So the Internet of Things can be, it means all things to all men and women, right? And there are many definitions. We're basically connecting more and more devices. And there's been devices out there for many years. Now they're starting to get connected. We're putting more compute capabilities into those devices, whether they're on the person, whether they're in the home, whether they're in the industrial space. There's just things being connected. But connecting the things and then gathering the data and using that data to make intelligent business decisions. It's not about, as Perry said earlier, it's not about the technology. Now I'm a technologist and I love technology, but it's about solving business problems. So how can I connect and collect data that I never had before and turn it into something I can make money out of?
So there's our challenge right from the beginning. The things are not about things, apparently, right? So that's, Roberta, when you think about this issue, you must have this question come up quite frequently.
Yeah, I think that it's still things, because we are talking about Internet of Things, but the point is the value that you can take out from the information and the data that these things generate that makes a difference. So again, the technologies is a component, and it's different now from the past because technology is cheaper and there are a lot of devices and more standard, and I hope to see even more standardized solution appearing on the market. And so this transformation is becoming easier from an execution perspective, even if it's still very complex. The point is that the value, I don't think it's just, as you said, in the connection of the devices, is these devices are connected and they can change how the business processes are executed. They can generate new revenue streams. They can generate new way of executing operational things, both on the customer side and on the asset operation side. So sometimes when we try, and as analysts, we are very fan of this kind of acronym of buzzword, but sometimes to replace the IoT, we talk about integration of IT, operational technology, and consumer technology, because at the end, is the integration, is the data value that you can get out that is quite relevant and makes a difference.
Well, Kevin put a point on it right in the beginning, and I want to hear from you two about, which is that there are tons of things, right? So, and you were talking about how to derive value from these things. Where do we, when we're talking about the utility, if we think about the grid as a single machine, what are the kinds of sensors and devices that we need to be looking at? You want to take a run at that, Barry?
Let's put value on it for a second instead of just the technology, because there's a myriad of sensors. So to go through those is probably an impossible task, at least for me it would be.
Start listing, right?
But you know, think about the network and the grid that's operated for 100 years. 100 years ago, you didn't have sensors. So the grid was something you learned about or by experience in the field. To find a problem, you'd send a person in a truck. It's really kind of the same thing as having no feelings in your fingers and toes. Okay, you didn't know what's happening out there. With smart meters and sensors and other devices on the grid, you can actually start to see that and get real-time information as to how the grid's responding, how it's acting. And a lot of companies here are going to tell you that we can now find hot spots through technology, et cetera. So to a grid operator, you don't need to send a person in the field to find out what's wrong. Send them back to a depot, get a piece of equipment, and correct it. The intelligence and the analytics of those sensored grids are going to tell you what's wrong, where it's located, what type of truck you need to dispatch, and what type of equipment to send. So it's completely changed the world. You can see, you can feel, you can understand your grid through digital technologies and sensors, and that was never available even a decade ago.
So you're talking about situational awareness.
Absolutely.
So we're getting a little closer. What do you think?
So, Carol, I think the Internet of Things is really a third wave of the Internet. The first wave was about connecting people to information. Think Google search. Second wave, people to people. Think Facebook and Twitter. Third phase is people to machines and machines to machines. So things in the electrical grid, the fault detection, hydrogen sensing in the transformers, the smart meters, geographic location data, asset data, all now spit out bits and bytes. And we can ingest that information, turn it into that data, and turn it into information that's actionable by an operator. It's going to change the way the grid operates.
Right. So I think these are all great answers, and they're all pieces of the puzzle, I think. But from the very beginning, you were talking about how do we add value to this thing, and I'm hearing various things. I mean, the sensors are important in the sense that they're generating data that provides us situational intelligence. Now we have other opportunities, which are operational in nature, so and customer-oriented in nature, business, enterprise-oriented in nature. So where do we draw the line between discussing the Internet of Things and in the utility looking at bringing up a comprehensive data analytics program? If I'm in a utility, how do I begin to integrate this into my work stream? What do I think about first? Do I think about the things I have in the field, or do I start to think about what my business questions are? I mean, where do I go first? I think, Roberta, you're nodding your head over there.
If you are a distribution company, we start with smart meter, transformer, and all these kind of things. The point is not where you start. The point is start from one element that is related to a use case, to a pain you have. In that way you learn, and by learning you then move on a broader scale. Because we have done so many analyses measuring the maturity of the industry around big data analytics, around IoT integration, all these kind of things. And it's very clear that on new things that are happening, including digital transformation, the maturity is very low. So probably it's too early to start with having a very clear, very few utilities might have a very clear vision of tomorrow. So start with some use cases and then extend it to a cohesive and overarching vision and strategy.
Kevin, do you agree with the idea of use cases being the place to start?
Yeah, but I suppose the use cases are based on a business need.
Yeah.
And we talk about utilities and we talk about the nirvana where everything's connected, and basically at a continent or country level, every atom of or electron of energy is used efficiently and ecologically, and when everything's connected and whatever. That's nirvana. Maybe we'll get there sometime. But today utilities, and depending on the country and their business model, whatever, they'll have a specific problem. To Perry's point, I might be trying to reduce cost. So how do I figure out that I don't send the wrong guy in the wrong truck to the wrong place? It saves money. If I'm looking at the data I'm collecting, I don't know what I don't know. So what we're typically saying to utilities is that, it's also unfair of us to turn around and say, well, the utilities, they don't have Internet of Things today. The distribution grids, the transmission networks, especially medium and high voltage, are very well instrumented. You can call it whatever you want. It's Internet of Things. They're managed. There are areas, the last mile, where it's a bit of we don't know what's going on. So that's the opportunity. but they have a lot of data, and they also have a lot of data they don't collect. It's sitting out there in various devices that collects data, but they don't use it. So if you can get the first step, figure out what data you have, pull it back somewhere, and do some analysis on it, because you don't know what you don't know, and you'll find some way of finding value, and that allows you to get some money to go off and invest in the next step, because it's very hard to do it all overnight in one go. It's just not feasible.
Yeah, and you were talking about situational awareness, so...
Well, and Capgemini actually did a study with MIT quite a few years ago about digital mastery and digital maturity, and it proved that digital masters are far more effective, more efficient, more valuable companies than those that aren't. But the study also told us one thing: it doesn't matter where you start. And I think I'm picking up on what Roberta was saying. You can start at the edge, or you can start in the analytics, as you started the question with. It doesn't really matter. You do end up in the middle, meeting and integrating both. So one thing we have learned, it doesn't matter if you're going to start your digital mastery around your customer, your operations, new business models, if you start at the back with the analytics layer, or if you start with the sensors in the field. They all converge.
What do you think? Your boots on the ground. Let's hear your insight. Yeah.
And what we found is the main pain point is the data. It starts with data integration. So independent of a use case that can be as wide and varied as our imagination, and I've worked on dozens of them just this year. But it starts with data integration. How can we handle, what data do you have as a utility, and how can we handle the millions and billions of data points we're getting from all of the sensors on our grid? So bringing that in and processing it and getting it in a format that is ready to be used to turn it into information is really the key pain point, and that's what the Bits2 system software is meant to do. Ingest it, get it ready for the use cases that can provide information.
So we're back to the use cases and data quality and integration issues. So if I am sitting in a utility and my boss comes to me and says, "You're in charge of the Internet of Things, and I'm actually going to fund you," it seems almost like a silly thing in some ways. And to your point that we've been there, we have an instrumented grid. Does that mean that my job is to go instrument more, or what is my first step? Is it to get the IT systems up and running? Is it to look for a partner? Do I try to educate my staff? What is it that where do I need to go in the utility as my first line of thinking when Internet of Things is now my charge?
But if I may, I'd come back to, if I walk into the CEO of a utility tomorrow morning, he goes, "Hey Kev, go make it happen." I'll ask for what? To do what?
Okay.
So if he says, "We got to roll out smart meters because we're mandated to," I'll turn to someone like Capgemini. You've done what, 130 million or something?
That's right.
Right? So done, right? And how do I get the best of breed, and how do I not make the mistakes others made and whatever? If someone comes and says, "I want you to do the ultimate dynamic demand response grid that's never been done on the planet before," that's a whole different set of partners, technologies, pain, because you'll be the first mover. So I honestly would come back to it's about the business case, and whether it's operational efficiency, situational awareness. I would boil it down. Now the technology underneath is pretty much the same. You said earlier about we have lots of standards. My personal opinion is I hope we get less standards. Right? We don't need more standards. Okay. We have lots of standards, and some great ones, but we have lots. And my standard's a different standard to you. But so things like the Industrial Internet Consortium, what IEEE are doing, driving industrial standards, not just for the energy industry, because the other thing that's happening with this Internet of Things, it's not just affecting the utility industry, it's affecting every industry. And from an Intel perspective, we look at this, technology is not, the pace of innovation is not slowing down. Moore's law is keeping going, there's more things. People find new ways of using the technology, new ways of finding data, making value from it. So it's affecting everything. The entire supply chains are changing as well. But pick your target. Pick something and knock it out.
Okay, so it's Roberta, what would you tell that CEO?
Well, the first thing I would do if I was appointed as IoT responsible person, I would ask the CEO what he wants to achieve, because I think that the vision of the CEO is fundamental, because he's the one that will go after and have the responsibility to prove that the company has taken action. So first of all, which is the mainstream he wants to look at, and based on that, I will try to create some quick wins in terms of example of things that are happening. And probably I will look into again, if I'm in a retail company, I will look to something around customer experience. If I'm in the distribution, I will look more to a sort of or generation, more industrial things.
Right.
So some little things, some concrete use cases that are related with the CIO vision, and then I will start working on really a sort of digital transformation journey, looking at several components, the vision, so the strategy, how you change the culture of the company related to that, then the experience with customer, but also with the partner. So we call it, at IDC, we call it omni-experience. Then I will look at information, because the information is a pillar of the entire transformation. So how can I leverage information to make them a sort of competitive advantage or a game changer? And then I will look at the operating model, and last but not least, to the workforce dimension, to think differently. So all these different components in different stages maybe, but a sort of
But I heard you say one thing, which you didn't say it exactly, but I heard it. Game-changing, low-hanging fruit, small discrete projects, get started, show the value, but always driven from the business problem. So you two will probably have a more unique, a different kind of perspective on that coming from where you're coming from. So, let's hear, I want to know what you guys think. What are these discrete, low-hanging fruit? Where do we go first, based on what these two have said here?
Well, I think there's three buckets to categorize. I mean, there's the customer, which Roberta brought up, there's the operational excellence, and there's a third pillar, kind of new business models. So what can you do with this technology to create other forms of revenue? On the customer side, low-hanging fruit, outage. Notifying customer when there's an outage.
Sure.
And your employees too, that gets the operational side, but the smart meter infrastructure can be tapped into for a fair amount of good. An example from Australia was a couple years back during the Australian Open of tennis. They had a massive heat wave, and one of the utilities used basic analytics against their smart meter data to predict which transformers were going to fail. They had about 99% certainty, and they weren't in the press for having power outages during the Australian Tennis Open. So they were very proud of that.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and the customer's experience on that was obviously better too. They weren't without power. So, that's low-hanging fruit. I think the analytics side on the operations, which I alluded to before, is sending the right truck to the right location at the right time. Big benefit from that. And as you get the business benefits on that, invest in further sensors. We haven't really talked about it, but pushing analytics out to the edge. It doesn't have to all come back into the data center, the control room. We're seeing a lot of technology here on the shop floor where devices are talking to each other. They're making intelligent choices about which network or which comms technology to choose to communicate back. So, I think that's going to give a huge benefit because you're not inundating the control room, the decision support process of a control room, because devices in the field are smarter. Maybe switching where electricity flowed, avoid an incident or an outage or significant.
Keeping the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But on the new business models, consumers want smart devices in their house, or at least they're starting to. The Google Nest, for example, and other smart thermostats are starting to become more mainstream. We want information about our house. Did we leave something on? We want to be notified when we're a kilometer away from our household and by phone. So that's going to be a huge area of growth. It might not be low-hanging fruit, but the technology is fairly easy to implement, and I think a lot of utilities have an opportunity.
Well, maybe servicing the customer's needs is low-hanging fruit that just has not been picked often.
Right.
Not for a lack of trying, but what do you think? What do you think the important game-changing
perspective? And to your question about how do we get started? We just heard a number of use cases. The problem is that just scratches the surface. There's so many. So instead we come at it from looking at what your platform should be. Before you get started, I would instruct somebody working for me as the CEO to make sure we pick a platform that can do all of the underlying processing. So as we come up with these ideas, the platform can be extended to solve whatever use case might come up. So that's handling some of the major points, like can we ingest data quickly, can we tag it and add metadata to it, can we process it into a model so it's easy for us to build and extend. Because these use cases are only limited by our imagination.
We're going to grow.
We have the data and getting the platform right is step one. Then you can really have some fun and interface with new applications.
Right. Well, it's interesting we're having this conversation because it's the classic internet, the early discussions about how's this internet thing work and how are we going to connect all these things. And so you've got a stack sort of approach, and we're looking at that too, but we're calling it the Internet of Things. And really, that just doesn't represent the whole story. So, to the point that each one of you have made, there are lots of things. There has been instrumentation for a long, long time. And if we're looking at the grid, again, as a machine, from generation to point of consumption, with distributed generation in the mix now as well, those points are just growing exponentially. It sounds to me like the common point I'm hearing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's about getting the information easily out of this various suite of devices. Some are going to do and then doing something with it, right? And depending on kind of what our function, our need is it keeping the lights on operationally? Is it helping a customer with smart home orchestration? Myriad things, industrial applications.
So, Carol, it's the integration is what the big challenge is.
Okay, that's the word.
We've
yeah.
got siloed systems that have grown up from 20-year-old customer systems that may be homegrown, all the way through to some unique sensors, fault detection, or what have you, that have just been installed. How do we take data across those systems and apply analytics to change our business? So, an example, when we help the utility integrate 55 different systems so that they can work with their SCADA systems to take the alerts, look at the GIS to know where it is, interface with asset management systems to understand assets at risk, go against external databases to see, in some cases, environmental issues, a fire is raging, predictively, where's it going to be? And then the work order system, where should our crews be? What skills do they need? Where's the immediate high value to go? All of those systems are independent, and you're working historically in the phones, and where's it? Now on a single pane of glass, with all those systems integrated, you can drive efficiency, ultimately keep the network up longer, and have a safer, more stable grid.
And you're nodding, Perry.
Well, and to build on that, there's a topic that I think, because the complexity is what Michael just explained, and sorting that out, the point about having the right platform is critical. One point that's not discussed, and we're working at Capgemini, we're working with our colleagues at Intel, but maybe security is absolutely critical. And you don't want that data to be tampered with, you don't want the devices, if they can actuate things, to be tampered with. So it is a huge area called cybersecurity, but it's also absolutely embedded within the Internet of Things, or IoT technology.
You guys on board with the integration perspective?
To Mike's point, if you don't integrate, the Internet of Things is taking data from multiple things and using it together. So if you don't integrate it, you get the siloed value. And
which is almost where we are in many ways.
Well, it's where we have been, and traditionally that's where it is. It is moving over. The other thing that's happening is that it's not just, and it's siloed within the industry, but what's now happening is that you're breaking into other silos in other industries. So, back to the point earlier, I'm getting all this data, where do I send the workers? I'm pulling in weather data, I'm pulling in the TV audience numbers of who's watching the Australian Open. So I'm pulling data from multiple places, but I need to have a platform that I can then drop it on it. To Perry's point, one of the things we spend a lot of time on is security. The flip side being privacy, right? Because you're kind of hard to talk one or the other. Right. So from a security perspective, if I ingest data, how do I know it's the right data? How do I know it came from the right place? Is someone trying to spoof me? So how do I know from the silicon that the data is correct, not that it just appeared out of fresh air in a Twitter message? So we look at it from a perspective of security has to be designed in. Now, granted, if you have an existing system, there are certain things you can retrofit here and there and be smarter and more secure. But ideally, when you start and you look at the Internet of Things, and you certainly go look at new projects, how do I design security in from day one all the way up the stack? Because you look at the data needs to be encrypted all the time. You need to, do I trust the source? So you need to start looking at security as something that you start from foundation stone, and not something that, I'll bolt it on later.
The Ontario Privacy Commissioner, I'm sure, would thank you for that perspective. I mean, it's right, building security in from the beginning.
But if I may quickly, the flip side is privacy.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot of things in security. I can guarantee that what's in your device is coming from your physical device because of technology. The flip side is that, well, someone else can know that as well, because and then you give up the privacy.
Sure.
So it's very hard to have ultimate security and ultimate privacy at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and with all those things, right? So we just have a few minutes left. So it's time for our parting shot. So I want to ask Roberta. So what I'm hearing is, our initial question is, what of the Internet of Things, and in the utility, why do I care? Seriously, is this just a distraction for me? How do I think about it? And what I'm hearing is that when somebody talks to me about the Internet of Things, what I want to understand is, why are you asking me this? What is the problem you think you're going to solve with the Internet of Things? And then once I understand that business problem, do I have the right data? If I don't have the right data, how do I get it? How do I integrate it and use these various data together to predict and prescribe? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, with one addition that we have not talked about, which is the innovation aspect, because of course, one dimension that we have discussed is solving business problems, so solving something we are aware of.
Yep.
I think that the Internet of Things, it's also a great opportunity to do things that we don't know, as you mentioned, and innovate the way the industry is positioning on executing for new business model maybe, or so the innovation dimension should also take into account.
Yeah.
And that all, again, comes out only from a different way of thinking.
So the innovation of things, the Internet of Things, the integration of things. Do you have a thought you want to leave us
At
with?
the end of the day, it boils down to some simple business drivers. Your network is going to be safer, more reliable, and more efficient if you adopt an Internet of Things and data analytics mentality. You're going to be able to do more for less. You won't have as much downtime, and you'll have public safety and other benefits. That's where it boils down.
Okay,
But you also have to answer the question, what's going on if the network, and of course I'm exaggerating a little bit, will not be so critical anymore because we are living in a different distributed energy. And I had conversation with some CEOs of distribution company considering that already. Of course, it's more a vision or strategic thing. But again, it's not just business critical things to be fixed. It's also inventing new business model and new opportunities for the future. It's more forward looking. I agree with you. We need to be practical and execute, but there are both dimensions to take into integration.
Are you in agreement with that?
Absolutely. We're living in a digital world, and every industry will become digital and mature, and the Internet of Things is just one of those elements of being digital. Imagine trying to attract employees in 10 years from now if you don't have a digital corporation. They won't want to work there.
Yeah.
It's down to competitiveness, right?
Right.
And as you mentioned, the competitive landscape is changing. There's new competitors, there's new entrants, there's new innovation, there's new things that we never thought of, and that will just continue. So doing nothing is not an option. And whether it's for a short-term win on operational efficiency, situational awareness, or looking at what's that new business model that we will thrive on in the future. Internet of Things is an enabler. That's all it is.
Okay, so that's great. So the Internet of Things, the way we've been using the terminology may indeed be hype, but it's really about the way we're going to do business in a digital world, a digital grid. So thank you guys so much. A great conversation on a really broad, difficult topic. So Kevin, Roberta, Perry, Michael, thanks so much. This is Carol Stimmel in the Engerati studio at European Utility Week 2015.